Hello and welcome to 10 Minutes with 1010. I'm Ash, co-founder and CTO at 1010, and we're going to be exploring AI adoption within organizations and practical considerations for actually making it happen. I'm delighted to be joined by Miriam today from Coincidencity.
Thank you very much, Ash. I'm very much looking forward to this podcast series. Many people talk about that they want to do AI, and they have some ideas that AI could really support their business or their team or their region. But when you dig deeper, they will find very quickly that a lot of these are very ethereal concepts rather than clear ideas of what they think what AI should be doing to them. What would you suggest are good ways to move from that ethereal concept into something that's actually tangible and then delivers business outcomes?
I think step one is define a pilot. Identify a suitable pilot in terms of whether that's a workflow or whether that's an activity that a team does with clearly defined boundaries in terms of what's expected of it, what the inputs are, what that looks like. And then once you have that, you're then able to move forward. Now, in terms of selecting that, you want to not boil the ocean. You want to go for something which is quite small in its scope, which isn't so mission critical. And at the same time, also is reasonably self-contained, that doesn't touch many, many different parts of the organization, need data from all the different areas to be able to do that. I think once you have that, the next step is then putting some structure around that in terms of a project, decomposing it into exactly what are the steps required to do this, what are its requirements.
And I guess it's crucially important to, on the one hand, yes, have that self-contained pilot and have clear boundaries, but also to bring more of the business community with them, bring more people with you along that journey. Because unfortunately, what we're seeing quite a lot in organizations is that we hear there is an AI team, they're doing something over here, and the rest of the organization doesn't really know what's going on. Sometimes they don't even know who's involved and what's trying to solve. And I think there is a real risk, first up, that you're missing vital input. So you're mapping certain processes, but if you're missing the input from frontline users, for example, who currently have lots of little workarounds going, you will be missing some key input into that. And secondly, the big risk is adoption afterwards, because we all know that it's harder for people to change the way how they've been doing things if they feel that it's not been invented here, that somebody else tells them this is the new way how you have to get things done.
It needs to be self-sustaining as well, or you need some mechanism in place to do that. I guess one of the classic challenges with that consultancy model is that you'll have a consultancy come in to advise you around what's required. You can sometimes miss a number of those workarounds because they haven't properly engaged with the people on the ground using it day in, day out. And then when they ride off into the sunset, what are you left with essentially? How do you have the teams maintaining it? So that's something that we really focus on in terms of being able to, after we've built these things, leave the people behind to be able to run with this actually as permanent employees of the organization. But as well as the tech, it's so important, that hearts and minds piece with the individuals that are doing it. You're absolutely right. You need to get their buy-in. If they feel it's been forced on them, then they will revert back to old ways of working. You have to have an easy path to be able to maintain it, to be able to upgrade it with the input from those users as they use it and they identify changes with it. And you mentioned a really interesting point there about the AI team. I think one of the challenges, and we touched on this in the last one, is that there isn't a clear definition of what AI is. And often in organizations, you have large data teams that maybe got some data science and machine learning capability there. They become the AI team. But if AI is also agentic AI and automating workflows, that team is not the team that you want going in there, speaking to the business users to be able to identify these use cases and to be able to decompose them and drive that change through an organization. So I think there's often a discontinuity there as well.
Very much. We're seeing that live all the times from clients who say to us, well, we've had the consultancy in, we've had the tech develop, we've done the skills training, we've done the hackathons, and we're still not seeing a lot of movement, or we're still having a lot of pilots just sitting there, not going anywhere, not scaling, not delivering. And the reasons are, they're multiple, but they also always come back down to the humans involved. And almost invariably, you find that they haven't involved the wider business community from the start. They haven't helped their people understand how they can contribute to shaping that, what the future of work with AI will look like, whether it is machine learning, whether it's agentic, whether it is individual productivity. They haven't spent that time, and they haven't listened to those frontline users sufficiently. And having your odd town hall or having your hackathon where everybody can create, yet these are nice, but that can only be just part of that behavior change that you really need to instill. And behavior change really starts with an identity change. So people have to consider and reconsider how they feel, and it is linked to emotions, not just logic, but how they feel they deliver value with their work, how they bring value to their role, to their organization. And when you tap into that, it's quite amazing how quickly you can create change. It's quite amazing that, no, you don't need 6 months of behavior change programs. You can actually really switch people's attitude very quickly. And with AI, it's perfect because the element of, I want to call it play, is almost built into the success, that the more people play, and I know it's a weird thing to say in a work context, but bear with me, the more they play, the more they experiment, the faster they get results, rather than waiting to be trained in a formal way and going through formal steps.
Completely. There's a balance there between encouraging people to play, which I absolutely think is essential. And I think if you really, for me anyway, what that playing means is actually trying something, but without being on the hook to actually have this thing delivered by a certain date to do that, because there's so many unknowns in it. That will just instantly make people fearful. So allowing them 100%. The freedom to be able to explore these tools and see what they can do and learn from them and get a level of comfort with it, I think is really important. So I think in terms of small-scale projects that organizations can adopt, I think one of the key things with agentic AI is really around being able to use LLMs in the way that you kind of want to be able to use them within your organization, to be able to make simple decisions for you as part of workflows. But I think as well, one of the key areas that many organizations struggle with is that idea of knowledge and being able to access that knowledge and being able to use it. And so that the concept of RAG, so retrieval augmented generation, the ability to be able to have an LLM, or to be able to question an LLM, or to be able to ask it questions, and it being able to derive answers not based on what it was trained on, but actually on your data from a variety of different areas is really powerful. And these things are becoming more commonplace, but at the same time they are very easy to do badly. I think one of the challenges that we see is that just full stop anything with LLMs is that even when it's getting it wrong, if what it comes up with is often very plausible and sounds very believable. So actually being able to know that if you ask it, maybe you've trained on a whole load of HR documentation, for example, and you're saying to it, what is how many days holiday I'm allowed at this point in time, it could come up with the wrong answer, but that answer would be entirely plausible. And that's dangerous enough internally. That's even more dangerous if that's been offered externally. So the understanding of how to prompt and how to configure those LLMs so they don't hallucinate, so you can force them to say just use the data and just answer the question based on that. Being able to put that structure and rigor around it, and being able to make these things scalable. You can have a small scale project like that of a knowledge base where you've maybe got a few documents in it and it will work really well. But how's that scale when you have 100,000 documents in it? How does that scale when you have 1,000 users accessing it at the same time? If you get that wrong, what you end up with is a pilot which works functionally on a small scale. But then when you actually come to scale it up, you've got to start again.
Yes.
You've got to almost throw that pilot away and start again. I guess there's some value from that in that you've demonstrated it. You've shown it to the business. They've said there's value in this. Let's take it forward. But what we really focus on is building these things right from the start. There are so many frameworks out there. There are so many tools, and the new ones come along on a daily basis virtually. By the time this podcast goes out, there's probably 3 new agentic AI frameworks that have appeared. But the point is that businesses need to build something which is sustainable. You can't just keep iterating on this whenever something new comes along. And that, again, comes back to these basic engineering principles. It needs to be built right from the start. It needs to be scalable. It needs to be secure. You need to have an understanding of what your cost looks like and how you can, because that's one of the big problems with LLMs. If you're just firing lots of tokens into this thing, you're going to escalate, the bill's going to go up very, very quickly. So having some engineering rigor around that, and a lot of this has been solved already. So you've got the big hyperscalers. So you've got the likes of AWS. So full disclosure, Ten10 and the Scale Factory are an advanced partner with AWS. A lot of what we build is on AWS. It's Azure, GCP, and some of the others. But essentially, they have a lot of that infrastructure in place to be able to build this stuff with the rigor it needs in order to be practical in an enterprise rollout, an enterprise application. So it's almost a case of building on those at the start with the foundations in the right place, because then irrespective of whatever does come down the line, and lots of new things will inevitably, you're going to be able to build that into the framework you've built already, and you're not going to need to throw it away. So it's a question of having that pilot, but at the same time starting it off on the right footing so you don't need to throw it away further down the line.
Yeah, because you're making some very good points there, that the pace of change with AI is incredible. And I see some organizations saying, oh, we will just sit back and wait to see what lands. Well, they will be sitting back a long time, so much so that they fall over at the back end. It's not, that is not a position that you can stay in if you want to stay competitive. Yet at the same time, what you describe in terms of having the robust platform is absolutely crucial. And I'm liking it a little bit in my head to, well, if I want to build a new car, I'm not going to completely, reinvent necessarily the differential that drives wheels. They will, there might be improvements in the mechanics and so on, but the principles will be the same.
Completely.
So that's a good platform on which to build a car, and then all the rest, whether it's a combustion engine, whether it's electric or whatever, can be changed over time. So you're building on that robust platform. Now, one thing that I believe we need to add into that, and we're seeing great results with organizations that do that, is you have the engineering rigor and you have to have the people rigor, so that people develop what we call the AI emotional intelligence that allows them to almost stand up to the AI, to be critical of the answers that you get, to not be swayed by the very, very persuasive answers that AI can give you. But that, if you ask it, how many days holidays have I got left? And it tells you 500, you go, okay, this is probably not right. But also when it says, well, you have 25 days left, and you go, is that reasonable? That is kind of, that's a very simple example of AI emotional intelligence, but you need to dig deeper, because there are a lot of a lot of scenarios where the answer can be very plausible. You are not necessarily the expert in the topic, therefore you will need to find ways to ascertain whether the answer is right, whether the answer is acceptable as well. So I've had a conversation with a law firm just recently who are very concerned about AI, for example, giving highly biased advice, and which could open employers up to all sorts of risks, particularly in the HR space. So you as the user need to develop that emotional intelligence, the way how I can look at you, Ash, and I can say, are you smiling, nodding, agreeing? And we establish an understanding versus somebody who might be very, standoffish. I could read that maybe they're not understanding my message and I would work with that. You actually have to do similar things with AI to assess, is it right? Is it correct? Is it ethically right in what it says? Should it give this answer in the first place? Or should this maybe be something that's reserved for human judgment? And the one test that I always like to ask my clients is, if you were to use AI and that use was going to end up on the front page of various tabloids, would you be happy to stand by it?
Yes.
Because that really sharpens the focus on the AI emotional intelligence that you need to develop.
I think that's a really key point, and I think there's that brings into I guess the scenario, the people and the engineering side to that as well, particularly around that rigor around testing and making sure that it's accurate. People, just to go for the people side first, people need the skills, and I think that's a very easy word to say, but they also need that emotional intelligence with it to be able to know if it's plausible. And so much of that, I think, comes from understanding.
Yes.
So we have a phrase we use all the time: it's not magic, it's just maths. It's very complex maths,
I like that.
but nonetheless, it is still maths.
Yeah.
I think if you're not aware at some level of how these things work and their limitations, then you are prone to believing it's just magic. So that's the people side there. So people understand the limitations. But the engineering side of that is that quality engineering and testing side to make sure that it does work. I mean, that point there of 25 days holiday, for example, it might be that the organization adds more days holiday with time served. So when somebody asks it then also needs to understand that it needs to look at how long that individual's been with the business to then determine how many days holiday they have. Or if in that scenario, the company suddenly says, hey, we're going to give everybody 30 days holiday, and the document is updated to reflect that. How do you make sure that all of that is updated? So then when somebody asks and says, how many days holiday do I have? It now says 30 and it stops answering that point. I mean, the point around, that's relatively straightforward to test, as you said, but that point around bias, that's much harder. There are frameworks that exist that allow you to do that, which are essential, but we're moving away from, does it work functionally? Does it give you the right answer to how is that answer formed? Are we at risk, as you mentioned with that law firm, of having something which is biased? How do you measure that objectively? And how do you say, yes, we're happy with this? And also keep monitoring it. You need to know it may have be very unbiased when you roll this thing into production, but then over time, it may drift.
Yes.
So you need to monitor that and then be able to take action when it's happened.
So these are, I think, the gaps that we address from moving from pilot into large scale. And I guess also these are the points that need to be addressed to stop organizations just being stuck in what people call the pilotitis, right?
Yeah, stuck in the pilotitis, or maybe even, to your point, not even getting started because they think, well, something new is going to come along, and when do we actually get going? Thank you very much for joining us today. If you'd like to find out more on anything we've discussed, please reach out to us at ten10.com, TEN10, for any technical aspects that we've covered. And for more on the people side, if you'd like to reach out to Miriam,
please find out more at coincidencity.co.uk. The exact spelling will be in the show notes.
Join us next time for the last episode in this series, where we'll be going into detail around exactly what you should look for in and engaging with an organisation in order to actually implement these solutions.